Welcome back. This is Inland Northwest Native News. I'm your host, Jeff Ferguson, and we are back for episode 11, and it's a great day to be Indigenous. If this is your first time tuning in, we'd like to say Lemlench, and thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the comment section below and email us with any story ideas you might have. Here at Inland Northwest Native News, we cover news and events for 11 tribes of the Inland Northwest, including the Spokane, Kalispel, Colville, Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai of Idaho, Nez Perce, Umatilla, Warm Springs, Yakima, Salish Kootenai, and the Blackfeet. We're here to fill the gap mainstream media so often neglects between the coastals, the plain tribes, the Southwest, and First Nations of Canada. If you're interested, we'd like to invite you to join us live 2 to 3 times a week. My co-host Margot Hill and I will be live streaming right here on YouTube to cover current and ongoing issues facing Indian country on a local, regional, and national level. We'll be covering issues like tribal gaming and missing and murdered Indigenous women from Capitol Hill to Olympia, from the National Congress of American Indians to the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, Northwest Treaty Tribes, and the Upper Columbia United Tribes. And again, we'll be live streaming right here on YouTube 2 to 3 times a week, so be sure to check us out. Coming up in this episode, we're going to be looking at the trailer for a native film called Red Road that was filmed right here in the Inland Northwest by local Native American filmmaker Ryan Abe. Then we're going to sit down with him in an interview to talk about the film and what it's like to be a native filmmaker in the Inland Northwest and what it's like to work in the film industry in L.A. and catch up with some of his projects he's been working on and what it's like being a young native father in this day and age, so be sure to stick around. In some of our upcoming episodes, we'll be featuring events from 2019, like artists Sonny Mokel and Betty Connors at Gathering at the Falls in Spokane, Inchulim Days with Tony Louie on the Colville Res, the Elmo and Arlie powwows with Alvin, Yellow Owl, and Francis Auld on the Flathead Res, the Salmon Ceremony at Kettle Falls, the BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color convening with Asa Washins on the Yakima Res, the Walla Walla Relays, Indigenous Peoples Day, and much, much more, so be sure to stick around. Like and subscribe so you don't miss anything, and without further ado, let's get to that film trailer of Red Road and the interview with native filmmaker Ryan Abe. Thank you once again for joining us. Lemnamsh She Uhoy.
Whoa there, Chief. It's a computer, not a circle of wagons.
Mexican, aren't you?
No. American. Nice try, though.
I can't understand abstract art.
That's weird, man.
That's not even half of it.
What else happened?
Nothing.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming out, making the time today.
Yeah, it's a great day. It's actually nice.
Last time we talked, we were at University of Washington, and you had just screened Red Road with Derek Lemire's United by Water.
Yeah. Oh, it was fun. The experience I had there made me think like this is only first of many, and I cherish every single time in the screening. It's like, oh, this is never going to be the same every time.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So Red Road, how long did that take, and what was kind of the process for that for you?
The process for that was I developed that way back in college when I want to say like the second or third month I was there in AI in like 2011, fall 2011. They were like, you got to develop a senior project. Think about it now. It's going to take you forever over the course of these years to develop something that's shootable, that's good. And they stressed like it has to be something you know and something you love. I'm like, well, I know myself pretty well and I love my culture, so let's do something similar to that. And that came in the form of Red Road, where it was just more or less discussing like spirituality in the contemporary Native American sense. Like, what does that mean though? What does that mean for everyone and me in particular? So all I really had to do was draw upon like life events from other people, like stories my brother told me and friends I've seen grow up and older Indians just telling me random stories of like their lives and their life struggles. And I wanted to portray that like, well, if we just distill that to like just some Indian dude, there's like probably 3 stories in the movie itself that actually pertained to me. Everything else is just like everyone else's life that I wanted to pay homage to, or homage.
For me, while sitting there watching that, is like, wow, there are so many, like you say, you know, it's a bunch of different people's lives, but there's a lot of things that are very kind of iconic and significant things that have happened to Indian people in all these, from all these different reservations, from all these different cultures, from all these different communities, and there's all these similarities to all of them, and you kind of took them and lined them up in a storyline that kind of illustrates a lot of them. That, you know, most films, when we look at when Indian people are portrayed, from what I've seen, I mean, there's a lot of different filmmakers out there that, you know, view it from different perspectives, but you had kind of a really broad lens that you were looking at, and then you were kind of, you know, going in and kind of targeting these pieces as you went along. How long did it take you to write that script, and, you know, what was that?
It was still being written when we realized we had the grant funding. Like we kept reworking different ways, like you're saying. There's some Native Americans portrayed in media, as you and I both know, is like you're either like the soulful sidekick, or the nature-driven savant, and I just got tired of that. You know, like us being Indians, we drink and we smoke, we have a good time, we want to live a little, and sometimes that leaves us in not the best light come daylight, but it's who we are, and that's just the film I wanted to portray. And the script itself was like, originally it was a terrible mess. It was like something where I just had to write it and get it down, and my buddy Mike, who co-wrote it, he was like, you know, this film is really about you. I'm like, it is, but it's not me. And I had to explain to him how many things I had to work into it, and how much a part of me I had to take out to make it work for this character. And that was all the way back in 2011. And we shelved it for, I want to say, a year, because we were developing other things. But when we realized we were trying to get funding, we ramped up the amount of drafts. I think the film we shot on was like draft 17. Like, and it would have made sense thematically if you read the script up to that point. Like, oh, there's an Indian in complete like buckskin, and he's rising out of the ground, and the lead character just kind of like horrified and kind of stricken with awe and kind of like disgusted. That's the level of like how many rewrites this thing went to, and I'm pretty happy with what it came out with. It was good. The story, I think, is people are gonna have to get used to the idea that not every like Indian lead is necessarily likable all the time, and that's what I wanted to portray too, real life.
Yeah, you know, there's so many times we see these, you know, well-known Native actors, and they're, you know, like you say, they're likable all the time. You know, and to get beyond that, to show that other side, I think, because everybody, you know, there's nobody that's likable all the time. Everybody has their quirks. You said you got some funding for this. Who funded it for you?
Spokane Arts Grant Association did. That took about 2 years of like writing the proposal. We went to all the workshops, and we went to all the meetings on how to write it, and webinars and things like that to get their attention. We asked for 10, they gave us 5. I'm like, all right, well, we got to raise that much. And we went to the Spokane and the Kalispell, and they gave us $2,500 each. Except one of those grants was like, oh yeah, we can't do it until after the project's done. I'm like, shit, oh, I gotta pay, I gotta do all this stuff. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm selling my Jeep. So I sold my Jeep Grand Cherokee. God bless its soul, it was a V8. I loved it.
I had one of those.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It's a great thing. And so I got like decent chunk of change for that. Then I was like, now we can shoot. Now I can like pay people to be here. I could get equipment. I can do what I have to do, and that worked out. And you know, I don't really have any regrets, considering like what Red Road, the film, has done for my company, Counting Coup Media, up to this point. It's a harrowing adventure sometimes, trying to be an indie filmmaker.
Oh yeah. How long? Or how many times have you screened Red Road?
3 times. One at Skins Fest, and I wasn't really happy with that cut when I went down there. Just because the color was off on some things, and I was just not 100% with it. That all came from like this terrible monitor we thought we had, but it just took some tweaking. And then at the Garland, and then at Washington State. Yeah. Well, we have it slated. We sent it to 8 different festivals around the world from Film Freeway, which is really rad. That they were all weird places. I think one's in Baghdad, the other one's in like somewhere in Uzbekistan, and the other one's in Peru. There's all over the world, and one in Berlin. I just want to send that movie out to random ass places and just see what people think. Like they see an Indian film and they'll be like, oh, like feathers and war hoops, but that one's very much like, I don't know, staplers and paying rent.
It's definitely unique in the sense that it portrays more real life stuff. If you look at how many times we're portrayed over and over and over again the same way, to send it out on a global level, that's great. Did you have any apprehension as far as when you started submitting? I know that some film festivals, they don't, and it's kind of a catch-22. They don't want you to submit any place else until you hear from them, because they want the world premiere to be there.
They do.
So was there any apprehension as far as sending it out, or was there like, I don't know if I want to send it there, because we want to get it in here?
Yeah, that's funny. So the only festival that held that like weight over us was actually the local one, Spiff. They were like, can't be shown anywhere else. I'm like, but like there's so many other things to do, and inevitably so I went off to go gallivant on some other film set somewhere, and we completely spaced out submitting it for this year. So I missed out on Spiff anyway. At this point, I just want as many people to see it. I think what Derek Lemire is doing with United by Water is perfect. Like, he's just like, anyone willing to see it, he wants them to see it.
Yeah.
It almost to the point of just like absurdity. Like, how many more laurels can we put on it? I'm hoping he just fills it, like with every laurel he has, just like keep making them smaller to fill that thing.
Oh yeah. Well, last time I saw there's like 20 on there. So
that's
pretty good.
It's pretty good, and like Red Road would be so lucky to be like that. Currently we just got the one, and we want that to be maybe 20, if not 40. We submitted to Amazon. They didn't care for it that much. I think it's minor things there, but that's okay.
I know that when you try to start submitting to online stuff like that, they have they have the continuity that they try to go for. So there's like minimums that you have to meet.
Yep.
Like the Netflix, certain cameras that you have to shoot it with. What did you guys shoot Red Road with?
FS7 on Canon FD glass.
Nice, very nice. That FS7 is one of my favorite cameras.
I love Sony so much. Guys,
they've had the technology for so long, and they've made it affordable. And for me, that FS7 is what they shot a lot of the Anthony Bourdain stuff with. So you had the real decent low light stuff, and then you had real nice slow motion that you could do with it.
I don't know. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, when you don't really miss that until you don't have it. You don't have that access anymore. You're like, oh man, that was nice. Well, that's great. So you talked a little bit about Counting Coup. Can you talk about how that all got started? How long you've been in business, and how you guys all came together?
We're in our 3rd year of operation. That started in 2017 on April Fool's Day. That was a product of back when. So I never used to want to be a filmmaker growing up. When I was raised age, I thought I was going to be a fighter pilot, until I realized I had needed glasses. And then some recruiters like, you need perfect 20/20 to be a fighter pilot. I'm like, well, LASIK. They're like, you could be a helicopter pilot. I'm like, I want to be a fighter pilot. So I gave up on that, and I guess I'm going to be a filmmaker. And from then I'm like, well, if I go to college and I go get a master's degree, like by the time I'm 26 down in USC, I should come back to Spokane and start a film company when I'm 27. And just, and work my way up from there. And by the time I'm like 33 or 35, maybe something will come of it. In a weird way, it worked out that way, except I was dropped out of art school because terrible shit. I had 2 quarters left. And I ended up founding a company when I was 27. And it was a rocky start. It's a product of the guys I met in college, actually. 2 other dreamers. Another guy, Aaron too, he's also came over. One's director, one's animator, the other one's just the dude who likes creating art. And I found kindred spirits with them, and they're like, hey, you're doing shit, and I'm doing shit. And at first, Counting Coup Media wanted to be like not Native American. We just want to happen to be Native American owned and be a part of like the broad spectrum of the industry. That didn't work out because you don't start a business without clients, right? But they don't really, like, I thought we could overcome that, blah, blah, blah. First year was not so well. But the 2 in this year is going out exceedingly well. Once we realized, like, well, let's be Indian and really lean into it. What does that mean for us as a company? It's like, well, it means you're now a resource for Native American businesses or tribes who just want to like know that their voice is their voice, as opposed to going to a media company like, hey, look, can you do this? And they're like, how do I make Lone Ranger as opposed to Tonto? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And Counting Coup Media kind of helps with that. And we're growing. We have lots of irons in the fire currently. Hopefully good things on the horizon for us. Yeah. Red Road was definitely a plus. People started to look at us differently the moment we shot that and showed them footage. They're like, shit. I know you're supposed to say you love your work and shit like that. You're supposed to like, this is my baby, it couldn't be any better. But I mean, I'd be a liar if I said it couldn't be better. There was moments where I'm like, oh, if this only worked out this way, I could have got this that way. And I mean, I'm not going to say like it's bad because it's missing it. It's just that parable of like, you have to leave your work, you know, it's finished when...
Oh, yeah, you definitely got to draw the line somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can always, you mentioned color a little bit earlier. I've spent countless hours trying to color correct. Man. Sometimes you just have a couple different colored lights in the room, and it just throws skin tones off, and you're stuck in this like black hole of coloring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can take a long time. So, yeah, I know the feeling. You got to say, when I started doing this YouTube channel, I started kind of falling into that, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go through, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do quick edits, I'm going to do quick color correct, I'm going to try and bust one out every week. Mm-hmm. Weeks that I don't have as much going on, get a little bit more editing. Weeks that I got a lot more going on, don't get so much editing. But I just decided, I made that decision to just roll with it wherever it came out, because there's not a whole lot of people doing what I'm doing.
No.
In this area.
Which is great.
It for me, it's an honor to be able to finally sit down and talk with guys like you. You know, I talked with, we interviewed Derek. Mm-hmm. I've interviewed just some amazing, Chad Yellowjohn?
Yes, I do. I love that. I love him. Yeah, I grew up with him.
He was in my last episode, and he came over and showed some of his work, and I just think that some of these voices need to get out there and be heard.
Absolutely.
And so it's really important. I had written some grants to try to get this funded, and at the beginning of this year, I was just like, I hadn't been able to round up any funding, and I sat down to write another grant, and I was like, I'm going to miss this whole season. Because I'm not going to, if I get funded, it's not going to be till September or October, and I'll miss everything. And I wanted to go to the canoe journey. I wanted to see the salmon ceremony and, the Walla Walla relays and all these different things I wanted to include this year, just because to get out and shoot it, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You meet some of the coolest people and you get their perspectives. And I think that opportunity is here for a lot of things. So, but it all kind of boils back down to when you're doing it, no matter what project you're doing, you have to know when to say when. You have to say, this is my baby, this is good looking as my baby's going to get, and then move on to your next project.
Yep.
So what about your, I think I see you were down in L.A. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was shooting an action film starring Ryan Felipe and Casper Van Dien. Casper Van Dien's, love him. Great dude. Worked with him on a previous set. It was a TV show, sci-fi, and like I was wearing my dad's jacket. It's the Spokane tribe of Indians, like leather jacket and shit. And I was just chilling, but I became like a sort of like a token Indian mascot down there, because we're in Louisiana, the Baton Rouge. It's a bunch of good old boys down there, and they were just super cool. Like, oh, you're Indian, and Casper's like, you're Indian, yeah. And they were like, they wanted to give me a part of playing a pirate that gets exploded. It's like, if it interferes with my duties. And I see him on this set, and when I was down in L.A., he's like, hey, Ryan. I'm like, holy shit, you remember me? Funny. I mean, it was a good experience. Going down there, like, so whenever I go on these big sets, these Hollywood films, I'm going there as an assistant camera, where like I'll I have my hands on the lenses, I have my hands on the cameras, I build the rigs, and I hand it off to the camera operator, and I pull focus for him. And it's a really fulfilling job. I dig a lot of it, but what I really go down there for is the experience and the training. Like when I see someone like, well, if I wanted to come up with like a chase scene with a guy on top of a car and there's like bullets going through the roof, like how do we shoot that? And I got to see how they shoot it, and I'm like, well, we can shoot that ourselves. We just need to pay the right professionals to be there. Like if you know if someone's gonna be in danger of getting hurt, you get a medic on set, stunt coordinator, pyrotechnics guy. Like those guys work together. And that's the kind of stuff that's what I was down there for. And I like to bring that knowledge down here. There were some things where I was like, damn, I wish I thought of that before I shot Red Road. Like, because I'm so used to like this one camera thing, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, let's do A and B camera. That just cuts things down, and all of a sudden things become clearer, less muddy. Yeah, LA was fun. I think the next one I'm slated to go out in October. I think that's in Winnipeg, Canada. Never been to Winnipeg, I'm curious. Here it's overrun with a bunch of Indians.
Yeah, I hadn't made it up to Winnipeg myself. That's cool that you're able to go out and do that and learn those techniques. You mentioned pulling focus. That's really such an important part of filmmaking today, and I don't think that everybody understands what that technique is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, how to shoot on a to get an image. There's a guy. There's the director of photography who's like lighting it. He's got the lens. He's got choice of like the image. And underneath him is like a camera operator. Well, all he's doing is I hand him a camera and he points it at, he tries to compose the image aesthetically pleasing, and my job is to get it in focus. So I'll have a wireless transmitter on his camera, wireless transmit to my monitor wherever I'm at, and I have a wireless follow focus, which is just, it attaches itself to the lens itself, and I'm able to wirelessly augment its focus. So I'm just staring at a monitor the whole time and like, well, shit, hopefully I get it in focus. And if I miss it, it's called buzzing it. And well, it's not always the best thing, but I mean, you always get like, it's assuming you don't get a camera rehearsal beforehand, and then you get like 3 or 4 takes. Sometimes you only get the 2 takes and you hope to God you get it in focus. Because last thing you want is like the director breathing down your neck and asking if you're all right when you're missing the shot, which has happened to me. Wasn't the best day, but whatever, you roll with it. Yeah, it's a team effort. Like pulling, like the way we have cameras now is like we have a guy holding like a DSLR, right, and he does it. But you split those 2 jobs up, 2 of them become better. Somehow when the guy doesn't have to worry about getting in focus, he just worries about composing the image. It's a better composition, and then the follow focus, all of a sudden things just become sharper and become snappier when you dedicate it. It's kind of like Pacific Rim, the Jaegers, 2 people piloting the same ship.
Yeah, it's you could definitely, when you see a film that's done well in, or one that's missing it, you can really, if you look closely, you could tell that the camera operator's pulling his own focus. But a lot of times, especially in big budget productions, it's mandatory because stuff happens so quickly, and you have to have somebody that's keeping an eye on where that focus is. It's really easy to get out of focus, especially with these really nice lenses that have really shallow depth of field.
Goddamn right. I worked with Zeiss CP2s down there. They were so like you know the width of a mechanical pencil's lead.
Yeah.
Just that. Like if you move the focus, you went soft. It's like, god damn. Before that, I was working with these big old Hawk anamorphics, and like the depth of field of that was like this. You had that much play room, but those were not so forgiving. Wow. And the ramp or the threshold, if they're walking towards you, like, all right, so you move it slightly, and then when they get within like a foot of you, it's like, you got it. It's a lot more work than one might expect, but it just comes with practice and experience, which I am still accruing.
Yeah. Well, they say it takes 10 years to master a craft. And pulling focus, I think, is a craft that some people can master. I don't know that I'll ever do it. Most of the stuff I do isn't quite that complicated. Definitely a lot lower budget. So yeah, till we all get our casinos up and going.
I hear that. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, what? So you guys, there's 4 you guys that are key players in Counting Coup? Is that right?
6.
6 of you?
Yeah.
What do you guys got? What do you got coming up as far as like your independent stuff that aside from contracting stuff?
Aside from contracting stuff, we just shot a promo for 3 promos, which is, I don't know. I mean, they release trailers for trailers these days, so it seemed in vogue. It's called It Came from the 80s, where these VHS tapes come from the 80s, and they're horror movies from the 80s. We haven't shot those trailers yet, but that's what we're aiming to do. We're developing actually 3 different properties currently. One's called Strongest at the End of the World, which is a pre-colonial story between a man and a woman, and it's like, I wanted to dial up the first part of Red Road where it was like, oh, Indian mysticism, and then real world. This one I was like, all mysticism, but with real world intentions, like life and death and shit like that. The other one is called Immolate, which is about we call them half-breed, half white, half Indian, set in. It's not set in any particular date or any particular territory or time, date time. It's set in. Think of it like a love letter to every like Western, where there's Indians, there's Hispanics, there's white people, black people, Asians, and it's in the middle of the Wild West. That one's about a man who's trying to track down his father, who killed his mother. That one's we're developing into a 30-minute TV show. We have originally it was a short. We were like, let's just shoot an 8-minute short. But the more and more we talked about, people were like, that needs to be 30 minutes. We want to see that. So that's going to be 30 minutes. Looking at 6 episodes and working on a feature called Removed. We're about, I think the last I looked was like 48 pages in. It's about the missing Indian women. And that one's like a sci-fi thriller where it's a mix between Alien and Children of Men. That one's the feature that I'm pretty excited about, like because there's so many people out there looking for Native American content. I'm like, well, we got a really interesting story that's based in absolute reality, horrific reality, but if we just pointed to like what could be the cause, a ridiculous story unfolds, and then ridiculous enough, it sounds plausible considering today's headlines. So that's the 3 we're developing currently. Everything else is just like contracts, and that's fun. Personally, I'm on my 3rd novel right now. Waiting for my agent to get back on my 2nd one. Goodness, it's making me worry.
Well, sounds like you're keeping busy. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you wouldn't think that asking my daughter.
Yeah, I always say better busy than bored.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So, what you talk a little bit about mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
You think there's a problem with mysticism in like the way Indians are portrayed today?
Absolutely. They're coming at it from a different perspective. Imagine reading the same book but in a different library. Like, it doesn't sound that like different, but a person reading like the same book in like Beijing may have a different outlook on the same book as opposed to Constantinople. Like, yeah, this is coming from a different place coming into this knowledge. That's just where that's just where its head's at. It's kind of like, what is that called? The study of humans anthropology. There was this funny statement that anthropology is really reproducing the Orient for the Western observer. And it's like, oh, so if we're reproducing something for their eyes, how does it look when it's us telling them what it is, as opposed to them just kind of like pulling something to tie together a loose story to fit their own interests. The mysticism, that's its main crux, is that the only time it's the same way that in Western culture they slay dragons, in Eastern culture they revere dragons. In Native American culture, mysticism, for instance, in Navajo or the Dene, they call it the witching way. There's no such thing as bad or good magic. But in Western culture, or Western observer, Hollywood, things like that, they need black and white to tell their story. To tell a more nuanced story might require more effort. Perhaps something no one would want to see. Why would you build a big, like, $200 million budget if someone wouldn't want to see? That's just bad business. So I don't really fault them for it. It's just more or less, I think they lack the resources, and they lack basically the person like you and I, where we're tempered Indian minds that's meant to deal with this industry. It's just they don't necessarily know that we're there, or if we're what they're looking for. And I guess that'll come with time, right? I mean, being ethnic is pretty in vogue right now.
Yeah, it's changed so much. There's so many things that have changed just in my lifetime. You know, I look back and you talk a little bit about how, well, we haven't always been able to practice our beliefs.
Never. Never. Yeah, up until recently. That was very recent ever.
And I don't think that most people, most Americans at least, understand that and couldn't imagine being placed in a box like that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the scenarios that I give, because we look at so many things in such skewed ways, I always end up going back to things that happened, especially at Standing Rock, because it was so significant. And the things that were happening, we had all these people that their ancestors were, their ancestral burial grounds were being bulldozed.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't want to see that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing it to build a pipeline. And so my analogy is, imagine if Indians were bulldozing Arlington Cemetery to build a casino. What kind of opposition do you think there would be then?
Oh, another wayward extermination somehow. I finished the job this time.
And it's like we end up having to try to tread lightly, whether we really want to or not, just to try to get things done. You know, there's so many things that we end up. It's such an uphill battle on so many forefronts, and it's hard I think it's hard for people to keep a positive mental attitude about everything. It's tough here in Spokane. Every time I go down to Riverfront Park, I think of 1858. When they slaughtered 900 head of our horses, and that river ran red with their blood.
It's true.
And in 1857, we had millions of salmon coming up that river, and now we have none. And we, not only was that our main staple as far as food, but that was our monetary system. That was everything that we would trade. That was just, I couldn't imagine having the currency of the United States of America totally taken away from all Americans, and then having all their sustenance and having all these things. But I try to keep all of that in mind. I always have been told the resilience. We have very resilient blood, and that really is kind of what keeps me going, keeps me kind of motivated to chugging along that uphill battle.
Absolutely.
What keeps you motivated?
See, I come from a lot of understanding of Indians from a completely rational academic dry approach, because it's the only thing that my colonized mind can comprehend. Because I was raised around the drum, I was raised in the sweat lodge, but I was also raised in the school. I was also told to wear Nikes, not moccasins. One of those type deals. And what I kept understanding was just how much today's world is hell-bent on tomorrow, and today is one of those afterthoughts, and yesterday is why are we even talking about yesterday? There's nothing we could do to change it. It's well, sure, but I guess reverence is an old wives' tale, as opposed to dig up the dead bodies. It's not like they're doing anything when oil will keep the engine running. Basically, I was told to act a certain way. I was told to think a certain way and talk a certain way, and I took that to heart, because my rational mind's well, I'm supposed to be this way to be successful in this world. This is what this world demands of me. But also the demands of my people are something radically different than that. It's to just live a good life, look after your elders, watch over your children, be kind to one another. The hard part is when I realize we hear different types of estimates, how many people were before that. And one I cling to is 120 million people. North America, all right, sure. 5 million of us left, just in the continental United States. But the resilience I gained from that is well, we literally refused to die from plague. What does that mean for our blood? I don't know. Did that mean all the smart ones went? Does that mean all the strong ones? I don't necessarily know. All we know is we got what we have. And we've always been very damn good with what we have. It's just resourceful as shit. Survivors. And that is something that I guess I take to heart, is that we're fighting for survival every goddamn day. And sometimes the weight of that will overcome us, and some of us will opt out of that early in life. And that's one of those tragedies that's rarely talked about, but you know, you've seen it, I've seen our friends come and go, being crushed underneath that weight of sadness and sorrow and anger. I use that, I feel it every day, but I channel it. Sometimes it gets out, sometimes I'll have a good wail in the night, or I'll punch a block somewhere. But that's what keeps me going, that fire there.
How do you feel about people that are trying to revive some of the old cultural stuff, like the the salmon ceremony? That's been real big over the last few years. Some people think that, well, I don't know how authentic that'll ever be, and I don't know if we're taking too much from the coastal tribes, or there's all these different trains of thought.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. It's one of those where I feel like we have to come to the understanding we have to decolonize our minds. Like, what's theirs is theirs, what's mine is mine. It's like, well, before there were like these drawn borders, those rivers connected us. I'm sure there was some coastal trader who traveled all the way up to Colombia into Spokane's territory, and they're like, what up? Hi, yeah, you like salmon? I love salmon. Let's love salmon together. The idea to say that we're like taking away from the coastal tribes is a little absurd, one might say. It's a way of division that is meaningless and ego-driven. Do I say stop it? Sure. But I mean, what do I know? I'm still a young man. I still have a lot to learn. Authenticity. What is that truly like? So being authentic has to come from its source. So if you're Indian and you revere salmon and you sing a song and dance about it, is that not a salmon ceremony? I don't understand the difference between the two. Like if he was a non-Indian, sure, where's the authenticity? But I mean, if you got the blood in you, you got the stories and the heart and the spirit, I don't understand this question of authenticity. It's just senseless food for thought, more or less, which I'm a fan of.
A fan of senseless food for thought. You're a dad.
I am. Yeah. It's funny. It's great.
Do you believe it?
I'll believe it when she tells me I am. She says I'm like, yeah, you're my dad, blah, blah, I love you. I'm like, that's great, Rhea. But you're a young, vulnerable mammal. And I am an older mammal that watches after you, and mammals reciprocate affection. It's just how we survived. And do I believe it? Yeah, because I feel it in my heart and my spirit and all that, sure. But it's hard to really understand what that means unless it's coming from the person who's saying this, and you actually get to understand their adult mind when they get to process their own emotions and tell you outright, like, this is what I freaking think, as opposed to telling me what her favorite color is, which is changing. Being a dad, it's a lot of responsibility. So obviously, the responsibility comes in the form of like, well, if I was anybody else but an Indian, I might not give it much thought, right? Just because it's like, well, what else is there besides, I'm in this land that my ancestors never knew before like 200 years ago. But I'm a guy whose ancestors lived here for thousands of years. And I have to instill that same knowledge and wisdom and respect into this little being. And let her know, like, other people can go to Europe and start a family there. You can, but you're probably going to feel a pull not to do that because you want to look after your people that are still around and need you. You didn't ask for it, but that's what you have. That's really tough because that's a lot for a young mind to take. And some minds just can't take it. She's strong, though. She's got her mother's spirit.
What are you afraid of the most for her?
the sorrow and anger, hopelessness overcoming her of being Indian. When you realize you're on a ticking timer. Certain zoologists would say, like, to start a colony for like a strong bloodline, you need 10,000 people. You know, that's more than most tribes. And for her to just come to this quick understanding, like, who she is in this world, what she actually lost as far as language and culture, and how many people are not around anymore, and being a woman is tough, being a woman of color is tough, being an Indian woman when they're going missing so goddamn much is tough as shit. I am fearful of that day should she tell me, like, Dad, I'm not okay with this. I don't think I want to do this anymore. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. That's something that, I constantly say I wouldn't want to be growing up in this day and age. There's so many temptations, there's so many weirdos out there, there's just, it's like never ending. Just this last weekend down at Hoop Fest, man, somebody tried to take this gal from her mom, like right there in front of everybody.
Ew.
And, they caught him. That was good, but that's just gutsy, and to know that there's people out there that aren't even afraid of trying that.
Exactly, yeah. There's billions of them.
Yeah, there was. I heard a handful of stories this last week and stuff like that. You talked about heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Who are your favorite? Do you have any native filmmakers that you really admire?
It's funny. The ones I can name are the ones that broke the threshold, right? Like Chris Eyre being one of them. Like seeing Smoke Signals, I'm like, no way they're playing an Indian movie made in the fucking theaters with, there's an Indian cast, written by an Indian, directed by an Indian. Holy shit. So I guess you could say Chris Eyre. Mainly it's the actors that I saw on screen, like Wes Studi and Adam Beach, those dudes, Irene Bedard, I love her. And this new dude who's in like a bunch of things, Yellowstone, I wish I could remember his name. He's in Yellowstone and he plays like the Indian mom and dad in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. God, I love their roles in that. No, I don't really got a lot of Indian heroes. I got two literary heroes. Turok, the dinosaur hunter. Because, that's just the coolest goddamn thing. Like, a Mandan and then he hunts and kills raptors and T-Rexes with his mind, basically, in his hands. And Nightwolf from Mortal Kombat. Something about like an Indian he was a shaman who basically went to Outworld to fight for Earth, not necessarily the people. He was just like, I love the Earth, and I'm gonna use the elements because he respects them enough. They granted him the power over them. Those are the two, and that's very small, right? I have way more non-Indian heroes, obviously, like Spider-Man being one of them, Hellboy. Oh, those two. Yeah, that's weird because I have these like claws at home, these Wolverine claws, and as a kid I was like, these are cool. Too bad the skin doesn't match mine. And like as a kid I wanted to be like those, and I went to South Hill once as a kid, and I was like, I don't know if it was South Hill actually, it was somewhere in Spokane, and I'm running around and it's like, you can't be Spider-Man, Spider-Man's white. I'm like, oh gosh, kids are little Hitlers. You know what I mean? They just have no remorse.
Yeah, kids can be cruel.
Yeah. Heroes. Indian heroes. It's a weird thing, right? You have to, when you try to come to just with who you are and try to find that in media that other people accept and shit. I was in DC and some like black dude was like, yo, habla español? Like, oh, sorry, I don't speak that. And he asked me, I'm like, I'm Indian. He's like, whoa, you still live in teepees? I'm like, aren't you the tour guide for the Lincoln Monument, which I was at? He was like, yeah. I'm like, shouldn't you know some history? Like, obviously, I was nice to him. I was like, no, man, it's cool. I play GTA. I like ordering pizza. It's just that level of ignorance that we're in a nice day where media is kind of catching up. I guess you and I just are trying to get ahead of that curve, aren't we? Or at least
Yeah.
try to be it. Because without us, I doubt there'd be much of us.
Well, the good thing is that there's room for error. You know, there's not a lot of people.
This is true. Yeah, yeah.
This is like, you know.
There's no set rules.
Well, you know, I consider us high end.
There you go. Indian chrome.
Yeah, it can be hard to try to pinpoint. You know, one of the things for me is like, even if you got and had an Indian hero,
Mm-hmm.
if he was Apache or Cherokee
Mhm.
or Sioux or Lakota or, you know, whatever he is, still not Interior Salish, Columbia Plateau,
Exactly.
or Ponderay, or, you know,
Mhm.
any of these other,
Yeah.
you know, one that really make it, you know, I can really understand, you know, that culture, and I really understand why that belief system is. But there are so many similarities within, you know, Indian country, but there's also things that set us apart. Have you ever, had you ever had a really enlightening spiritual native experience? Is there something that you remember specifically that you're like, wow?
Definitely falling asleep to the drums at night at a powwow. I say that because, like, that was normal to me growing up, because like, my family has a drum called Shimmikin Creek. We just, like, I was an infant, just newborn, and like, they were drumming and singing as loud, and I was in my mom's arms. It's like modern, I guess, like, parental nomenclature would say that's a bad idea, but it wasn't to me. The one time I know, like, I could say I had one of those is when I went back years later to a powwow, and I was going through a really tough time. It was a really dark area of my life. This was like 2013. I was just, I was starting to let the sadness and anger overcome me. The hopelessness started to envelop me, and I was just like, well, I don't know if I'm long for this world. And I go to my hometown powwow, Welpana powwow, and I'm sitting in my Jeep, and I'm just like, whatever. And this is after Home Sweet Home. Everyone's going to blah blah, but I just hear the drums and the singing, and like, I started to almost be lulled back to sleep. I started to feel like as if I was still in my mom's arms, and my family was all surrounding me in a drum, and I slept peacefully for a number of hours, and I woke up thinking, like, that was literally the one thing that put me to sleep, because nothing else could at that point in my life. Like, no amount of drugs or no amount of malfeasance could catch up with me and draw my breath away. But that did. The drums and the singing in the night. I've tried to have one of those really awesome religious, spiritual Indian experiences in my life, but I think it was the fact that I was trying is why I failed.
I've heard that. I've heard that people, when they pursue it too much, that it can be elusive.
Probably.
Yeah, but it's funny you mentioned the drums. There were two experiences that I had that were just awesome. When I was a little kid, I used to go out to the Welpana powwow, and I would go out to the stick game, and I'd take my can and I'd beat that teepee pole down there with the drums.
Mm-hmm.
Bang, 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 like that. And I would sit out there for hours and hours and watch them play stick game and listen to all the songs. And it didn't occur to me, and this just happened probably 6 or 7 years ago. I was over on the coast. I was over in La Push on the Quileute Res, and they had their drum circle over there, and they invited me to come out to their drum circle. They were going to be singing, and I got out there, and they started up with their drums, and they started singing this coastal song that I hadn't heard since I was probably 3 or 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I remember this song. It was so powerful. It was just like, wow. I could, my eyes were welling up, and I was just like, I can't, totally unexpected. I didn't even think anything about it, about going out there. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go hear those old songs or anything. But when they started up and I started hearing those, it's just like, wow, that was really enlightening. There's some other things that I've had too. One of the best ones that I remember was about, I guess it's probably about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I went out to Welpana, and there was they had George Flett with the Prairie Chicken special going
Oh,
out
yeah.
there, and they had the big drum out, you know. He made that really big one with the Prairie Chicken dancer on it. And I went out there, and they had that huge grand entry of nothing but Prairie Chicken dancers, and it was in the old dance hall, so that it was just so loud in there, man. Oh, and those guys, there's like 12 guys around that drum all singing, and that made all the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And those Prairie Chicken dancers came out. That was amazing. That was just awesome. And you know, our new facility out there is not quite as intimate as that one was.
No, well, it's not.
But it was, you know, it doesn't have all the nice dust in the air. Kind of missed it.
Kind of missed it. And how loud the tin was during rain.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think the drums are, you know, that's one thing that's really significant in our culture, and it all throughout Indian country. There's people in different types of drums, different sizes, different sounds. But,
My clan brothers and sisters down north sing on the water drum. My dad likes to bring me to all the Indian ceremonies as much as possible because he's aware, like, sometimes I struggle with the darkness. And he took me to on the coast for the Native American church, where you just go into a teepee at sundown, you sing, tell stories, and then till the sun comes up. Up until that point, my first time going to that, I was actually fasting I was on my 37th day on my fast, just water fasting. That's something I've done throughout my whole life. Just something I like to do at times. I never advocate, you should fast. That's ridiculous. I go there on my 37th day, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do this. I didn't know you ate medicine, drank medicine, peyote. Big ol', I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, I don't know if I should do this. I just ate. He's like, well, don't do it, but just know that, like, you're here because a medicine is for you to have. It's gonna make you feel better. I'm like, well, if you say so. My old man's smartest man I know, fine. And so, like, they pass around this big bowl, and I just, like, I see a guy next to me who just, like, kind of does this. I'm like, you took that much peyote? All right, never wanted to be outdone. I eat it. Holy shit, that was bitter. After 37 days, it was the first thing I ate. And then, like, drink this, and then it's peyote tea. Like, right? One in Roma, and drank that. Singing, looking into the fire, and all I did was feel extraordinarily sick. Because my body, like, they're saying that your medicine's meant to do that. It's meant to shake out all of the bad stuff in your body, and you're supposed to expel it if it happens. It's part of the ceremony. Happened. I tried to keep it down because my ego. And afterwards, it was one of those I was hoping, like I was telling you, I wanted what he was talking about. I wanted what every Indian wants, is like a spiritual journey somehow, where all of a sudden everything makes sense. All I did was come with the understanding that I didn't go there necessarily for me. I was there for my father, who, when he got to tell his stories, I started to understand him better as a human being. And I was thankful that I was there for him. And in that understanding, I became more at peace. In a lot of ways, I find that's largely the truth of Indian medicine, is just what happens, not necessarily what you're looking for.
Yeah. Wow. What an experience, huh? 37 days.
Oh, dude, yeah. Like, after that, I was like, since I broke it, because I was going for 40, so I was really sad. But I was like, I want an egg. I want a fried egg now. Oh, yeah. It was so good. It was really good.
What do you miss about, like, maybe your childhood or your younger days?
Not having non-Indians telling me what to do.
You miss that?
Yeah, like, I grew up in the middle. Like, my dad found a canyon on the res, and he's like, I'm going to build a house in the middle of it. And there's not another person around for another mile. So, like, I got used to being around a creek, a prairie, coyotes. Like, anything in the Pacific Northwest lived in that canyon. And all that was in that canyon was my brother, my 4 sisters, my dad, and my mom. And a shit ton of cousins whenever they came down. I miss the most about that is just I got to do whatever the hell I wanted. I could go outside and start a fire somewhere. I didn't, Mom. I was very... And I moved off the rest when I was 18, and I came here, and they're all of a sudden like, you gotta mow the lawn. I'm like, who's saying so? The neighbor. I'm like, why? And then I started to like, you know, that understanding of like what you are and who you are completely different in the sense that like you have to exist in a society. We march at the slowest person's step, and at that point it was me, and they're telling me to get to step in. I miss a lot of that. I miss the idea that like I could hear just nature. But I do love the city. I fear I'm too civilized for Indians and I'm too barbarous for non-Indians. That's who I've become. Maybe I'll just ride that shtick into the Oscars.
Shtick, huh? Huh. Cool. Well, I appreciate your time. I thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah.
Sharing with me. Sharing with us, you know. I look forward to seeing your next piece. Cool. Thanks again, man. I appreciate it.